Brace yourselves, because I'm about to show you a war crime. Okay, so what's going on there then? Well, it's all to do with this symbol, which you'll recognise as the Red Cross. But what makes it a war crime to have that on that uniform? Well, it's all to do with the Geneva Conventions, and it is conventions, there are 4 of them. And there are 3 protocols to the conventions. And the 3rd protocol deals with what we call protected symbols. The Red Cross is the most famous, but there's also the Red Crescent, the Red Magnan David. There's the Red Crystal, and there's also one, it's called the Red Lion and Sun. That's the old Iranian one. It's not currently in use, but it is still an official symbol. And I wish they would bring it back, because nothing says sort of like, peace and neutrality, like a lion waving a big sword around. But what do these mean? Well, they're not necessarily indicating medical facilities, although they can do, because they're recognised in international law. It basically means don't shoot, don't attack, don't bomb. It's for an area that is one that is of neutrality or, not a legitimate target in combat. So it can be medical facilities, it can be places where civilians are gathering, schools, anything sort of, like that. It can be even critical infrastructure if it's not being used in the war efforts. And, like I said, the idea is you just sort of, mark those out, and it's a war crime to attack them. But that obviously means these symbols need to be protected, because if people were misusing them, to misuse one of these symbols, it's a war crime itself. It's called perfidy. Perfidy is where you take advantage of the rules of war. To cheat, basically. I mean, a classic example is you can travel under a false flag and try to sneak into places, but before you engage in combat, you must actually take down the false flag and put the your own correct flag up. And that's where we get sort of the saying, show your true colours, because that's what it means. But yeah, so to protect these symbols, they're not allowed to be used anywhere else for any other purpose, and that includes things like fancy dress uniforms, but also you may have noticed first aid kits have now changed, and we've got sort of like this, the green symbol now, and that is specifically because it's an offence under the conventions. It's also an offence actually under English domestic law, because that incorporates the Geneva Conventions. You can use them on like sites of cultural importance, like even like museums, art galleries, sort of things like that. Although in art law, international law, we do actually have our own symbol, the blue and white shield, and you put that on buildings, important architectural buildings or anything like that. So you will see that actually in war zones, and the idea is that you're not allowed to target them. But there's also the flip side, which is you're not allowed to take advantage of them. So if you shoot from a building with a protected symbol, then the protection vanishes again. So and also you commit the offence of perfidy. One perhaps weird rule when it comes to the sort of medical use is, under international law, if medics are actually embedded as part of a unit, like sort of you have like Marine Corpsmen and people like that, you are allowed to shoot at them. However, if medics are detached from units and actually only called in, when needed, medic, then you're not allowed to shoot at them. So that's a rather strange one. In practice, generally, there have been some very nice examples of good conduct where people haven't been shooting at medics. I mean, famously, when in the invasion of the Falklands, there was the fight at Government House, and some guy was being treated on the ground while people were sort of agreeing to shoot round him. Also, speaking of the Falklands and the Red Cross, one little known aspect is there was something set up called the Red Cross Box, and that was an area of sea where both Argentine and British hospital ships were moored up all together. And it was agreed that that was a completely neutral area, and that flights to and from either side to the hospital ships, they were not to be targeted. What's interesting about that is that both sides treated the wounded of both sides, and actually resulted with a Royal Navy surgeon, he actually received medals from both the British government and the Argentine government. And the Queen actually, he had to get the Queen's permission to wear the Argentine medal, and because of the, why it was granted, then she allowed that. So that's another sort of like little interesting tidbit, perhaps. Finally, what if, say, you want to protect everything in your city or your town or your village? Then you can declare what we call an open city. You announce it to the side, you say this is now an open city, and the rule then is you are agreeing not to defend it in any way, but the people coming in there under international law, they cannot, they can occupy the city, but they aren't to engage in any sort of combat or destruction. So, and that happened with that's the reason we do still have, like, beautiful Krakow, because that was declared as an open city. But anyway, there you go. Hope you found that interesting. If you did, please consider clicking the like button, subscribing and sharing.